morning. Our group has decided to portray poverty and inequality in Hong Kong through the example of working poor. Firstly, I would like to briefly introduce the dimensions of poverty and inequality in Hong Kong and in workplace. According to the Poverty Situation Report in 2020, the poverty line in Hong Kong is set at 50% of the median monthly household income without considering government aid, which in year 2020 was 4,400 Hong Kong dollar for one person households. The government aid includes one-off cash subsidies, recurrent subsidies, and means-tested benefits such as public rental housing and financial assistance for kindergarten and childcare. However, in 2020, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Hong Kong experienced a severe recession. The labor market deteriorated sharply and was characterized by noticeable rising unemployment rates and decelerated wage growth. It has also worsened Hong Kong's wealth gap. This resulted in one-fifth of Hong Kongers living in poverty, which in fact is the highest number in 12 years. The citizens are surviving on as little as the equivalent of 510 Hong Kong dollar a month. Women holding top jobs in Hong Kong were paid considerably less than their male counterparts. As a result, the number of homeless women tripled in the past 7 years, and only 55% of women are in the workforce. This is also because some women opted out of progressing in their careers to have more time to care for the family, which was comparatively rare among men. In 2019, there were around 16% more women living out of 24-hour fast food restaurants than there were among the homeless population. This suggests that homeless women prefer seeking shelter at overnight eateries as the restaurant's light and clients offer them a greater sense of security, as women face greater risks on the streets than homeless men. Not only the homeless women, but working women also face discrimination. While 24% of females felt that they are discriminated against gender in their workplace, only 15% of male employees felt the same.
So moving on, our case is adapted from local news and some data related to female under poverty. The first article is about a single mother called Anne. She is now unemployed and her only source of income is the 9,000 government allowance. This amount of money is used to pay rent, water, electricity, and the study fees of her daughters, which is very inadequate. In the past, she received money from her husband, but then it was ceased since the pandemic. She felt helpless as government support was very limited. She hopes that the government could provide more financial and social aids to women for them to return to their workplace, like child care services, so women could have more free time to receive trainings and practice their skills, enhancing their employability. And then there are some research about women living under poverty during the pandemic. According to the data released by the Government Poverty Alleviation Committee, the number of female in poverty soared from 806,000 to 887,000, and the poverty rate increased to 24.2%, which was higher than male in poverty. The female unemployment rate doubled sharply from 2.8% in 2019 to 5.7% in 2020. 3 surveys were conducted during the pandemic. It is found that more than half of the interviewees were forced to quit their jobs to take care of their kids during the school suspension, so they lost their salaries, which was difficult to support their daily lives. 45% of women were unemployed, and over 80% of them revealed that their income shrank more than 50%. So it could be shown that the pandemic worsens the problem of poverty.
There has been a significant increase in the number of street sleepers in general from 2016 to 2021. This change is primarily influenced by the pandemic, as most of them resided in 24-hour restaurants before COVID started, but were forced to seek shelter elsewhere after restaurants were closed down in the evening. Our initial plan was to interview 2 to 3 local female street sleepers at Sham Shui Post Tung Chau Street Park, but they refused to be interviewed when we approached them. This could be a result of inaction of our local government, causing them to feel pessimistic about change. The situation can also be analyzed in correlation to the premise of learned helplessness, which is described when individuals have repeatedly experienced stressful situations, resulting in a vicious downward cycle. Years ago, the local media have already interviewed homeless in Hong Kong and attempted to raise awareness and improve the situation, but still no concrete actions have been initiated. Other than that, they could also be preserving their rights to privacy, as they're living in an open environment, and we noticed that their tents and personal areas were mostly surrounded by men when we were at the park. Since we were unable to conduct the interviews ourselves, we turned to internet sources and found an interview conducted by a YouTuber last year. The woman interviewed has lived in Sham Shui Post Tung Chau Street Park for about a year. She explained to the interviewer that her unemployment was caused by depression and the lack of motivation to find a job after her husband's death. Living in an open space constitutes a lack of safety, especially with a male-dominated community, and there have also been cases and a history of sexual harassments around the area.
Who is interested in keeping the situation is basically 3 types of stakeholders. First, the high-earning individuals, predominantly male. The corporations, for example, the blue chip companies and the male groups. There are a few reasons to explain why they want to keep the situation. First, the issue does not directly affect or concern them, as they can still earn considerable income, so they are not aware the seriousness of the issue. Also, the companies keep using the cheap labor to minimize costs. They make good use of international division of labor to deprive the low-skilled labor. And the male are taking the advantage of gender inequality to have more job opportunities and have a higher income.
Now, let's talk about the people who strive to change the situation and the reason behind. They include the government bureaus such as the Labor and Welfare Bureau, third parties like the Equal Opportunity Commission, NGOs like the feminist organizations, the disadvantaged female contrast to advantaged male, and finally those who are suffering the same in both society and the workplace. Why do they crave changes? Isn't it good to keep the societal status static? For government bureaucrats, it is their obligation to safeguard the well-being of every citizen, be it male or female. For NGOs, Hong Kong as an international city should keep itself abreast of modern values. Finally, for the disadvantaged female and those suffering the same, their reason for changing the situation is very simple. It is their basic human right to be treated fairly. It is firmly believed that females can create the same as males, and they need higher income to make ends meet and live a humane life.
Now we further examine what could be done and by whom to improve this problem. At first, we'll look at Hong Kong's income inequality. Hong Kong owes its wealth to a kind of ultra-free market economy and has a high concentration of wealth on the top 0.001% of citizens. From an economic perspective, this has to be regulated, for example, by increasing corporate and personal tax rates, introducing inheritance tax, and also capital gains tax in order to beat cross-generational inequality. When thinking about the working class of Hong Kong, which has the largest share of population, some fundamental rights and conditions have to be established. These people need legal protection and job security. Even though Hong Kong has this huge income disparity, the government provides public housing to 50% of population. But when looking at the conditions that people and families live under, one can speak of poverty. But people can't move out because they're simply outpriced by the market. Also, single and two-person households spend about 45% of their income on rent. The government has to include these people in their housing and welfare policies. Furthermore, rent controls are needed both when looking at base rent but also at potential rent increases. So our second problem, the gender inequality, comprises, well, population-wise, women outnumber men with 10% in Hong Kong, but one is far away from talking of gender parity. Traditional social attitudes are that women are homemakers and mothers, and this thinking is clearly out of age. Achieving gender equality depends on small everyday actions and how everybody contributes to it. When educating girls, Hong Kong still has room for improvement. The enrollment rate of girls in secondary schools is about 88%, which is reasonably lower than in the UK with 98%. Analyst reports show that a 5% increase in this figure, combined with a 10% increase in female labor force participation, could even lead to an increase of 40% in the GDP. Therefore, educating girls has a positive relation with economic growth. And at last, work has to be an inclusive environment. Currently, only 15% of directors in listed companies and also Hong Kong council members are female. Furthermore, caring responsibilities are a barrier. Women drop out of workforce and also employers show resistance to hiring mothers. Again, women need male support to ally for this change and drive gender parity, because in the end, everyone has to overcome his or her stereotype and discrimination.
Our goals quantified in numbers are as follows. Hong Kong has the 11th highest Gini coefficient in the world. We couldn't find data for the coefficient in 2022, so we combined data on the coefficient from 2016 and the average change in index growth as a result of COVID to approximate the coefficient as 0.566 in 2022. Our goal for Hong Kong in the next 25 years is seeing that coefficient drop to what it was 25 years ago, around 0.45. The ratio of female to male labor participation is actually improving in Hong Kong. From below 60% in 1990 to over 80% today, we believe that Hong Kong should continue this trend and increase this ratio to 90% in the next 25 years. South China Morning Post says that the gender pay gap in Hong Kong decreased greatly from 22.5% to 13% from 2018 to 2022. The graph on the left shows that the decreases in the gap are largely due to improvements in female wage in elementary occupations, coincidentally jobs held largely by the female working poor. Our goal for Hong Kong would be to further reduce this pay gap to 5% by 2030. This leads us to the end of our presentation. we want to leave you with one message. It's that change comes from the people, and all of you listening can contribute directly or indirectly to gender parity by donating, spreading awareness, and many other ways. Thank you for listening.